Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to all of you here. I am Amira Farah binti Abdul Rashid from School of Computer Sciences, University Science of Malaysia. I'd like to present my paper entitled Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, the Privacy Challenges. Social networking sites, or SNS, have been a platform for developing new friendship. People can share and exchange opinions. It does not just provide information, but it is a whole other virtual world where people communicate and connect with anyone else in this world. Although the trend of SNS has shown immense growth, but people tend to forget and underestimate what are the possible danger they might face for posting confidential or sensitive content due to privacy issues. The aim of this study is to provide an overview of the strengths and weaknesses of the existing SNS in the aspect of privacy. What does privacy means? Privacy refers to the right of an individual or maybe company to deny or restrict the collection and use of data and information about them. Researchers are specifically drawn to these issues because even though it provides goodness, so many advantages to both providers and peoples of SNS, the gradient development of these networks have evoked several serious privacy issues. We must understand that by signing up to multiple SNS, I believe that most of us here have more than one social networking sites. I engage to more than one social networking site. So we are exposing ourselves to high risk of cyber threats which can invade our personal space. Such unwanted attention can be minimalized by proper understanding of privacy settings. When we understand the privacy settings, then only we can maximize the privacy setting and we can protect our personal information. And there are certain criteria which affect the way an individual approaches privacy control. For example, gender is said to play an important role in decision making of an individual. Besides gender, age and education level are also one of the criteria. With reference to interviews of 398 online consumers, researchers have made an inference that generally online privacy and security concerns are higher in younger, highly educated and introverted males. Okay, now moving on to usable security. As privacy relates to the right you control the data, whereas security is the protection of the data, how we protect the data. So since privacy is the main objective of this paper, security is also equally important in order for the data to be fully protected. Developers should provide clear explanation of the feature. This is because we want the feature, the privacy setting, to be suitable and understandable for all type of users. The term usable security is another perspective that plays significant roles to ensure that security, usability, and privacy can be integrated accordingly. So, moving on to the motivation of the study is, as we know, a big fraction of people on the internet are surely users of any online social networking sites. And these social networking sites have been important asset and for individual growth and even for our country's development. However, with all the benefits, with all the advantages, comes the high risk of online threats. So even though programmers have even developed privacy icons which display the website privacy notice to help users to get idea easily, but there have been remarkably little work that investigate and compare the privacy features. So the findings of my paper is divided into two sections, 3.1 and 3.2. 3.1, it illustrates the collection of privacy features. This is all the collection. I collected all this and we are going to narrow down the study or focus on only Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and we will compare all these three with 11 features. So I identified these 11 features and we are going to compare it now. So users, when you see the first feature is discoverability. Users can choose whether the profile need to be discovered by email and phone. How people discover you. So for Facebook and Twitter, if you see, we can choose you can choose whether you want to be discovered by email and phone. But in Instagram, users can choose whether the profile to be discovered by phone only. It cannot be discovered through email. So if you forget to close this setting, if you forget to choose in Facebook and Twitter, means people can find you through email and phone. But in Instagram, people can only discover you through email. We don't want random person to just put in our for Instagram only discovered by phone. So we don't want random person to just discover us through email. Just put in our email, oh, this is the person. We don't want that to happen, right? So in this case, Instagram scores a point. So when we go to the next features, which is profile visibility, what does this mean? So who can see your profile? So Facebook, we have this only friends can see your profile. Means you can change it. You can make it private by changing the settings. Means no one can see your profile, only your friends can see. Same goes to Twitter. Twitter is the posts are public, but you can change it to protected tweet. Same goes to Instagram. Users can either make it private or public. And when we go through this number 3, connectivity control, it means that who can see your friends on pages that you like. Connectivity control is anyone can add you. Who can add you on your social network? So in Facebook, anyone can add you as a friend, but you can change the setting to only friends or friend can add you. However, in Twitter, anyone can follow your post. If you change it to protected tweet, then you will have to approve the users. But in Instagram, anyone can follow. However, you still can approve. You must approve. But in Facebook, it is different. If you change to only friends or friend can add you, means not randomly people cannot add you. Means the friends of your friend can only add you. Means you must have some mutual friends with them, then only they can add you. So for me here, Facebook score another point. Moving on to feature number 4, which is message control. Who can send you message? So for Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, they have the same system, I guess, because you see, friend can send you message, but the means you can automatically read the messages from your friend. However, if they are not your friends but they still want to send you message, can, but it will move to spam account and you will have to accept the request. Same goes to Instagram also. User can receive DM or direct messages from their followers. If a non-follower, then it will move to request. It will appear as a request in the inbox. And for Twitter, user can receive DM and they can choose and from their followers, and you can receive, but you can choose to allow anyone who send you DM. Same goes to Twitter. So moving on to the next feature, which is personal connection, means who can see your friends and pages. For me, this is quite personal because I don't want any random person to see, oh, these are the circle of friends of Farah. I don't want anyone to see what are the pages. If you see the pages I like, my interest, then maybe I'm a gym freak, then I like gym pages, right? So this person will be at this gym. So I don't want this. Definitely this is quite personal for me, for everyone, I guess. So in Facebook, we have this feature where you can change it to only me. It means that only you can see your friends and also the pages you like. So I think this is a fantastic feature for Facebook. In Twitter, everyone can see your followers, but when you change to protected tweet, only people who follow you can see your followers. However, I feel that even sometimes we cannot believe our own friends, right? Because sometimes the hackers might be from our own circle of friends, right? So Instagram also same. Everyone can see your followers if your profile is public, but if you change it to private, only people who follow you can able to see the followers. So for me here, again, Facebook score another point. Moving on to next, which is tagging control. Anyone can tag you in Facebook, but you have the review button. If you choose yes, then it will appear in your feed for Facebook. For Twitter, you can straight away prevent anyone tag you in a photo. And for Instagram, you can manually approve the tag. It means that only with their permission, same like Facebook, right? So you can choose to either delete it permanently or you want that to appear in your profile. Next is photo control. So in Facebook, you can limit who can see your photo. You don't want certain people to see, then you can choose it. If you want sample photo to be seen by yourself, you can choose only. If you want only your friends to see, then yes, you can do that in Facebook. However, in Twitter, you cannot limit who can see your photo. Means once you post, you cannot customize it. All right, your followers can see the photo. And for Instagram, you cannot limit who can see their photo even if it's private account, but you can archive it. Archive means it is not that lenient, because in Facebook you can choose friends accept who they want to see your photo, but in Instagram, when you archive it, only you can see the photo. So for blocking, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all three have it. And facial recognition only for Facebook, we have it. Twitter and Instagram, they don't have it. And okay, this facial recognition is what does it mean? It means that when you sometimes tag your photo, before you typing the name appears. So this feature is in Facebook. All right, so to the next feature, which is connection to search engine. By default, Facebook is connected to search engines, but you can change it. You can change if you don't want to connect to anyone. Twitter, Instagram, you don't have choice to be out of any search engine. Two-factor authentication, we have all this for Twitter, Facebook, and also Instagram. Alright, so this is a summary of the presence and absence of important privacy features. As you can see clearly, Facebook have the highest number of privacy features that is more flexible to the users. So moving on to discussion, utilizing the available privacy setting provided in SNS, users can effectively protect the privacy and confidentiality of the information. And since no similar previous work have been reported throughout comparing the privacy features of SNS, I guess that this paper is useful reference for other practitioners and researchers will provide the bridge to shorten the existing gap. And last part, conclusion, limitation. This study reviewed 3 SNS based on their presence and also absence of important privacy features, and after analyzing, we discovered that Facebook have the highest number of privacy features. So after this, we can go home and check whether our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram is fully maximized, fully protected or not. You can change all the settings so that your privacy setting is maximized. And the limitation of the study is the number of SNS being compared are only 3, and this is due to the time frame that the study had selected. For betterment in the future, more SNS could be added, and researchers can also find the significant link between security and privacy features of SNS, together in leveraging the understanding on how to use security technology and the risk or the threat. And that's it. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you, Amira.
Thank you
for your presentation. And we allow the audience and the panelists if you have any question on Amira's presentation. It's an interesting presentation, and it's very important for everyone. So yes. I hope there'll be some questions on it.
Maybe I have a question.
Okay. Come on, Dr. Aziz.
I guess, I'm not sure if this is available in your field. There are 2 types of privacy. As I understand, you focus on the privacy of user from public. But I guess there is also privacy of user from the company itself, from Facebook itself or from Twitter. Maybe you did not consider this point, right?
All right. Okay, Mr. Dr. Izaldin, this is just my preliminary work. We will do this in future. We will study, we will compare like what you said just now. We just start the study now.
Yeah, because I noticed that Facebook invades our privacy in different ways.
Yeah.
With advertisement. I mean, if they know, for example, and I see this often. Once I search, for example, for shoes, all my advertisements are shoes in Facebook.
Because I think you have to change your settings. Before this, if I search about shoes, same like you. So once I notice, oh, we have so many privacy features that we can change it to the best, then only you won't be seeing that. So in future, I will try to include what your question just now in my future studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aziz. Thank you, Amira. Any other questions before we move to the next presentation? Okay, it seems there's no other questions. I just want to check if there's some in chat. No, so thank you very much, Amira.
Okay, thank you.
Good luck with your research. Thanks very much. Thank you. All right, now we move to. Sorry. We now move to the next presentation, which is on hybrid crypto system using cozy group and Chautix maps applied on ID data. It's written by, or it's going to be presented by Hiba Abu Ghali and Professor Muhammad Mekki. Professor Muhammad Mekki, he's a professor in parallel and distributed computing in computer engineering department at the Islamic University in Gaza. And he has about 20 years of research and teaching and consulting experiences in various computer engineering disciplines. With this paper, I think the presentation will be done by Hiba. I think she's with us. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So Hiba, she's, I think you're doing master at,
master.
Are you working at the Technical College, Palestine, or I'm not sure. Yeah, Engineer Hiba, because I don't have your bio, so you can introduce yourself during your presentation. Okay, you can start now. Therese, can you play it? Sound. I can't hear you. Therese, you're
her biography in the second page, in the file, in the second page.
Oh, you want me to play it myself or you play?
No,
I can.
Her biography is in the second page.
Yes, I know, but this is a biography of Professor Mekki.
In the second page, her biography in the second page, the file.
Okay. I don't see it. I see. Okay. Yes.
Second page.
I see Professor Mekki biography. Professor.
Yes, the second page. In the second page, her biography of the file.
Okay. Oh, sorry. With the okay. I see what you mean. Oh yes. Okay. Thank you. So, Engineer Hiba Abu Ghali, she's a lecturer in the computer department at Palestinian Technical College with about 14 years of research and teaching. Also, she worked at Al-Aqsa University, Al-Quds Open University, and other 3 places as part-time lecturer. Engineer Abu Ghali has occupied the position of head of System Operation Division at Ministry of Finance for the period 2014 until 2015, and worked as computer engineer there for a period January 10 till May 14. She obtained her master's degree from the Islamic University of Gaza. Her thesis awarded as the best master thesis in the Islamic University of Gaza. She has graduated in 2006 with BSc in computer engineering from Islamic University of Gaza with first rank. Engineer Abu Ghali published many publications in both international journals and conferences. Her primary research interest is in the area of cryptography. Also, she carries out research in many other areas, such as computer security, image processing, artificial intelligence. So I think now we can go on with the presentation, and go ahead, please.
For the crypto system using quasi-group and chaotic map applied on one-dimensional data. Authors: it's me, Hiba Abu Ghali, lecturer at Palestine Technical College, and Muhammad Mekki, professor at Islamic University of Gaza. In this paper, we developed a crypto system using two techniques, chaotic maps and quasi-group. First, what is a crypto system? What is cryptography? What is the encryption process? Cryptography is a process that used to transfer data in unsecured network, unsafe network. Just only the receiver who can understand or read this data. For example, in e-learning, e-commerce, e-health, any application, every day we use multiple applications via internet or unsafe network. We want to send data, no one can understand it, so we make encryption. We encrypt this data, so the receiver, the only one who can read this data after decrypting it. Cryptography used every day, everywhere, in many applications, using smartphone, using laptops, using smart devices. We connect other people, we make communication. This communication must be secured by using cryptography. Chaotic map, one of the two techniques we used, is a mapping algorithm built on chaotic behavior. We use the discrete map. It has two types. We use discrete maps. This discrete maps used as an iteration manner. We use it because it has a good properties, characteristic. This property is very useful in a crypto system. This characteristic or property is subtlety of initial condition and parameters and random-like output. The output of these maps are nearly random, which makes it useful to using in a crypto system, as we will see. These properties make it like a confusion and diffusion cryptography algorithm. So we use chaotic map as one of two techniques that improve the crypto system. To get the benefit of chaotic map crypto system, we get benefits like it's various against the statistical attacks and its various aspects. Compare between chaotic system properties and traditional crypto system property. Cipher round, we can use the iteration in chaotic system. It's like it. Encryption key, we can in chaotic system use parameters. Sensitivity to initial condition is a good property of chaotic system, like diffuse in traditional crypto system. Finally, the iteration in traditional crypto system is like heterogeneity in chaotic system properties. Another technique is a quasi-group. Quasi-group algebraic structure is a group. This group has a property that division is always possible. Other property that is not necessary to be associative. We use it in our crypto system. Quasi-group has the ability to generate a large set of permutation. So we can make a good or a huge number of keys from simple or small set of data. Quasi-cipher uses a wide range application because it immune against brute force attack and give a huge resistance to statistical attacks. Our crypto system. The proposed crypto system use Kotick map due to their characteristic sensitivity, sensitive dependency on initial condition and system parameter, and other property random like output. We use also quasi-group in this crypto system to control techniques of generating a large set of permutation transformation. Both techniques are used in our crypto system, voice crypto system, to get a good crypto system. We use 3 phases: initial phase, encryption phase, and decryption phase. First, in initial phase, preparing the secret key, construct quasi-group for encryption phase, and prepare the quasi-group to be used in decryption phase. Produce a variable to be used in Kotick map. That's the initial phase. Encryption phase, we need to get the input, the voice signal, the original voice signal, and the output will be the steps. First step, initialize the initial parameters. The second, convert the voice signal to one-dimensional array. Step 3, we use a quasi-group to shuffle the array. Then, apply the Kotick map on the array to eliminate the voice characteristic and to change or alter the value of this signal to be unreadable data. So we get the encrypted wave or the encrypted signal. Then, in the decryption phase, in the other side, in the receiver, we use this encrypted signal to be the input, and we will get the output as original voice signal. First step, initialize the variables that we need. The second step is substitution process by using the Kotick map, inverse Kotick map. Step 3, we use also the Kotick map on the array to inverse the transposition effect. Last step is to use the inverse quasi-group to reshuffle the array. Finally, transform the array to be in the wave format to get the original wave. As we see here, the encryption process, initialization parameters and variable, convert the wave into one-dimensional array using the quasi-group. Second, use the Kotick to make transportation and substitution. Here we reverse or inverse the process. Firstly, initialization, then this process is in the inverse of this, and this inverse of this, and inverse the quasi-group. Finally, convert the signal to be wave signal and get the original signal. We make this experiment and implemented in MATLAB by MATLAB software. We make 4 experiment will be shown here. The 4 experiment using 4 different waves, as we will say. For example, the first experiment is the original wave, and this is the original wave autocorrelation. Here the encrypted wave and its autocorrelation. We use the autocorrelation and entropy as measurement for analysis. We notice here autocorrelation is steady, nearly fixed value, has the fixed value, although in the first image or in the first original autocorrelation it has different value. Here the encrypted wave totally different from the original wave. Second experiment, the same. Here the wave and its correlation, autocorrelation. The encrypted autocorrelation, we say it's also steady value. Here we have positive and negative values with peak and different value. Here has steady value. The third experiment, we get the same result always. The autocorrelation for the encrypted signal is always nearly steady, nearly fixed value. The last experiment 4, also get the same thing. From the different values of for the original autocorrelation, we get a steady autocorrelation in encrypted wave. The autocorrelation of the original wave has multiple different value, peaks, thoughts. Other hand, autocorrelation for encrypted wave almost steady value. The result was the same for all experiment. In all experiment we get an unified autocorrelation in the encrypted wave, although the original wave were different and had different autocorrelation. What's the meaning of a steady autocorrelation? Why it's good thing? Because it prevents the estimation of the original wave. Because whatever the shape or the content of the original wave, always we get a steady autocorrelation as in the figures. Autocorrelation is a tool that we use to find the pattern in data, especially repeated pattern. So when we get always, although instead of the original wave different, we get always the same output, so the same encrypted wave, the same autocorrelation for encrypted wave. No one can estimate the wave, can't get the wave. From the previous figures, we see that autocorrelation of the output for all scenario very similar, even though the input was very different. In other words, the crypto system get the good result in terms of diffusing and confusing. The other measurement tool is entropy. Entropy measures the randomness of signal. We express the texture of the input. Entropy, the way to measure disorder and volatility. We need to maximize the entropy. For the result. For experiment 1, the original signal was 1.7, nearly 1.7. The encrypted signal has entropy 9.9. It's very low, it increases to be 9.9. We increase the randomness. Experiment 2, it was 7.3, the encrypted 10.4. Experiment 3, 6.9 increased to be 10.4. The last experiment, the last wave was 5.6, it increased to be 10. Always we have nearly value, nearly 10. Experiment 1 increased the entropy to be 10, which means that it rise the entropy, rise the randomness of the wave. The original wave lost its original characteristic, and that's required. Other experiment also we get different value of entropy, which nearly 9.3 to 10.3 to 10.4, which means that we get the random distribution of data in encrypted wave. So in this paper we discuss a crypto system that give a good result. The characteristic of signals eliminated and the encrypted wave are nearly similar. For different input, different original wave, we get encrypted waves are similar, nearly similar. So this crypto system is suitable for its usage. The system here with its phases increase the degree of diffuse and diffuse characteristic. Simulation result, we say that we notice that the random distributed of encrypted waves regardless the value of the key or the value of the original voice signal. in analysis of the security issues, we get always the autocorrelation uniform and steady, and the entropy increases value in the encrypted waves. So this crypto system can be used in many future applications.
Unmute your mic, Dr. Rashid, please.
Yes, thank you, Engineer Hiba, for your presentation. Very interesting research. If we have any answers from the audience, please. I think Engineer Hiba will be ready to answer any questions.
Of course. There is any question?
Yes, I have one question.
Okay, Dr. Rashid.
Engineer Hiba, you have just used the intro in your security analysis. You have just used.
Can you raise your voice a bit, because I don't know, I can't hear it myself.
Okay.
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, Engineer Hiba, you have used only the entropy test in security analysis.
Only what? Can't hear.
The voice is very low. I don't know. It seems maybe you're
Maybe you can write it, Engineer Raed. Please write it.
How is my voice now?
No, that was good. No,
Very
it's
good.
much better.
Okay. Engineer Hiba, you have used only the entropy test in your security analysis. Why haven't you used other security tests like nonlinearity, autocorrelation, and other?
Autocorrelation used. I used autocorrelation.
Have you? Why you haven't used other testing criteria like bit independence criteria, and there are other testing criteria like nonlinearity and bit independence criteria?
As it's one-dimensional data, I found it's enough this measurement. Maybe in future work I try to use other criteria.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Engineer Ryan. Any other questions from the audience?
I have a question, please.
Go ahead, yes, Prof.
Actually, two questions. The first one is regarding the security key, whether it's static or dynamic. And if it's static, how long is the security key? Whether it's 64, 128, because the efficiency of any cryptographic system is highly determined by the length of the security key. So we need to know whether it's static or dynamic. The second one, why did you go for 1D data? What about 2D and 3 data? Do you have any future works regarding the 2D or 3 data?
Nice question. This paper is one stage or one phase from other stage. The first stage is the key generation. I do it, but I not published yet. It's using by a Jamal crypto system, but I modified it to generate a dynamic key. The second phase was using this algorithm by two-dimensional data like image. It was wonderful result, but not published yet. The last thing is to make a hybrid or make a two-stage crypto system. The first one generate the key. The second put all these types together. It will be published soon, inshallah.
Okay, then we're waiting for your future publications. Good luck.
Thank you.
Do we have other questions? Okay, thank you.
I think maybe this is something not related to your master work.
Related, yes. Related to my master work.
I know that you are started your PhD in Turkey, right? Or
yes, just yes.
Right.
Okay, we wish you good luck.
Thank you. Good luck in your PhD
Thank
and
you.
your research work, and you will be looking for your next publication. It's very interesting.
Sure.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll move to the third presentation by Engineer Harriet Fosey, Al-Quds. I think he's with us. Yes, he just asked a question. So, Engineer Harriet Fosey, he's received a bachelor's degree in computer system engineering from Department of Computer System and Software Engineering, Merhan University of Engineering and Technology, MUET, in Pakistan in 2004. He also received his master's degree in communication systems and network from the Faculty of Information and Communication Technology at the same university in 2007, when he worked for the Ministry of Agriculture as network troubleshooting engineer between the years 2007 and 2008. He's a full-time lecturer in the Department of Computer Science and Information Technology at the University College of Science and Technology at Khan Yunis in Gaza. He is now a PhD candidate of Faculty of Information and Communication Technology, University of Teknakal in Malaysia. His research interests are communications and networking infrastructure, routing protocols, disaster response network, cognitive radio and cognitive radio-based protein protocol. And the paper he's going to represent is in association with Burhanuddin bin Muhammad and Nurhati bin Harun, and started a comprehensive survey on routing protocols for cognitive radio-based disaster response network. So you welcome Engineer Khaled, and the Zoom is yours, as they say.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد رسول الله. First of all, please allow me to thank the ICPET conference family for granting me this opportunity to participate in this conference. I wish all the بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد رسول الله. First of all, please allow me to thank the ICPET conference family for granting me this opportunity to participate in this conference. I wish all the best for the conference, for the participants, and for the audience as well. Let's first move towards the title of this article, which includes three main terms that are the routing protocols as the research issue, and the cognitive radio as the technology, and the disaster response networks, which will be referred to as DRNs later in this presentation. Now, please allow me to briefly introduce these three terms, as they will be the core of this research. First, the routing protocols, and routing is the core of any network or the core of any communication system, because it simply determines the way in which a data packet will be transmitted from a source node to a destination node. Usually there are two main types of routing. First one is the static routing, in which the routing is maintained based on either a distance vector or a link state of that network. The counterpart is the dynamic routing, where the routing is actually performed on either a reactive fashion. In this fashion, the routes between the transmitting nodes are established only at the time of the transmission, and those links or these paths or these channels are terminated as long or as the job is done. The proactive routing is the counterpart, in which the routes between the transmitting nodes are maintained as long as the network is alive. And finally, the hybrid routing, it actually encounters features of both the active and proactive routing approaches. Now, the second term is the cognitive radio, which will be introduced in the next slide. But for now, we can say that the cognitive radio is an intelligent and smart technology whose primary concern is the radio spectrum efficient utilization. And now this technology is characterized with two main features. First one is the cognitive capability. This capability enables a cognitive node to sense the surrounding radio environment, looking for a spectrum of opportunities, and then it changes its routing parameters based on those opportunities. This explains the second feature of the cognitive radio, which is the reconfiguration or reconfigurability feature. Now, the last term is the disaster response network, which is basically an alternative name for many types of networks, including the public safety networks, the emergency networks, the delay tolerant networks, the restrained networks, constrained networks. Sometimes it's referred to as post-disaster networks, and many other types of networks. Now, these networks could be infrastructure networks, they could be ad hoc networks, or even they could be wireless sensor networks. What we are really concerned about regarding these networks is that they are marked with their distinct routing requirements, these requirements distinguish these networks from other conventional and traditional networks, and we will see this in the upcoming slides. Now, the question to be answered is, are the existing cognitive radio-based routing protocols able to cope with and handle the distinct routing requirements imposed by the disaster? This research or this article is all about an answer for this question. Now, in a moment, please, I'd like to illustrate the cognitive radio technology and how it works. Normally, the radio spectrum is licensed to particular users or particular agencies, and this makes it impossible for anyone to simply utilize the radio spectrum. Those users need to pay charges, or I can say high charges, for the local authorities in order to be able to access the particular ranges of the radio spectrum. Those licensed users, or I'll say the primary users for now, they are not continuously utilizing the licensed spectrum, and there are times during which the spectrum is actually vacant and available for use when the primary user is inactive or idle, we can say, and those time slots result in what's known as the spectrum holes. The cognitive radio is all about allowing other users to, they are referred to as cognitive users, sometimes the secondary users, to opportunistically utilize the spectrum during the times in which the primary user is inactive or idle, provided that the cognitive user will immediately leave the channel of the primary user at the arrival of the primary user, so that no interference will occur between the primary user and the cognitive user. Now, this concept is very helpful in disaster scenarios, where the spectrum is the most precious resource at all times of disaster, which are unpredictable, unfortunately, in terms of time, in terms of place, in terms of consequences. Since nobody knows when the disaster will happen, nobody knows where the disaster will happen, and even we don't know what will be the consequences of the disaster. The infrastructure networks after the disaster, the infrastructure is partially or fully disabled or damaged as a consequence of the disaster. Also, the wireless communication systems, whose base stations and networking equipments are placed or located on the ground, they also may be disabled, for example, due to power outage, which normally happens after the disasters. This all results in a link breakage between the ground and the internet cloud, which unfortunately isolates the disaster region from the world and makes it almost impossible for disaster rescue and disaster resilience efforts to be initiated and coordinated. Here comes the need for the cognitive radio, which enables the cognitive nodes or the cognitive radio equipped nodes to sense the surrounding environment for any spectrum resources and utilize them. Now, we can say that the cognitive radio is such an intelligent technology because its operation is based on the cognitive cycle, which is started with the sense operation, followed by the learn operation, and the last one is the decide operation, to decide about the radio spectrum or radio channels to be used. This all results in an efficient utilization of spectral resources in such a complicated scenario of implementation known as the disaster response network. Looking at the existing communication systems or communication standards before proceeding for the routing protocol analysis, now these standards actually have their own routing schemes. That's why we got concerned about them. These standards are either wired or wireless. Now first, let's agree that the wired solutions are not feasible in disaster scenarios because after disaster the wired solutions or the wired communication system are highly prone to damage and disruptions. The wireless solutions, on the other hand, that I provided in this table, they are also not feasible due to their limitations from perspective of disaster response networks routing requirements. This will be mentioned in the next slide. For example, the Bluetooth lower data rates and transmission ranges are not reliable for disaster scenarios. Same thing goes, for example, for the wireless LANs. It's high interference and latency. The WiMAX, for example, is not feasible due to its power inefficiency in the licensed spectrum. Also, the radio frequency components are very expensive, and so on. As a result of this analysis, those standards cannot cope with or handle the routing issue in disaster scenarios. It's too important here to say that those standards are reliable and efficient for traditional and conventional scenarios, but as we mentioned, the DRNs are such complicated scenarios, and what works in traditional scenarios may not properly work in the disaster scenario. Also, these standards were not developed, they were not designed, they were not dedicated for such complicated scenarios of implementation, such as the disaster response network. Now, moving to the core of this article, which is the routing protocol analysis. Here I have analyzed a number of routing protocols. They were categorized into two groups. The first group includes a number of routing solutions, almost 11 routing solutions. These solutions were implemented in scenarios that are somehow similar to disaster scenarios. The second group, Group B, includes another category of routing protocols that were not yet implemented in disasters or even in disaster-like scenarios. The analysis was performed from perspective of routing requirements. These requirements were collected from many literature works, and it's clear now that any disaster response network should be featured and empowered with those features, including, for example, the quality of service. That means any disaster response network, there should be quality of service aware. It should be robust and reliable. It should be mobility aware. It should also be primary user activity aware. The spectrum utilization should be agile. It should support for the multi-hop routing, and those routing requirements in front of you. From this analysis, we can see that the existing routing solutions are still unable to cope with the routing requirements of disaster response networks, since the requirement satisfaction percentage, as in front of you, range from 30 to 60%. And this is not anyhow good enough for extreme emergency networks where any failure to maintain a connection may result in loss of lives or even destruction of properties, and takes down the chances to save lives. We can conclude that the existing routing solutions are not yet to satisfy the distinct set of routing requirements imposed by disasters. On the other hand, the cognitive radio has a high potential to act in such a scenario. Its capabilities may be a feasible solution in lower density areas where the number of subscribers is low, while the network or communication system deployment charges are very high. It's also capable of enhancing the network performance in terms of coverage ranges, data volumes, and transmission rates. It's also possible that after the disaster, the primary radios are even disabled. Therefore, the transmission can be immediately directed towards the cognitive radio in order to replicate or replace the primary radios. Even if common mobile communication services and power lines are still functioning, I just remind you that all these service providers provide their services only for the primary users. Also, the software-defined radios, SDRs, can also provide a solution when embedded in personal computers or even personal computing devices. in conclusion, we can say that routing is a critical issue, especially in constrained networks such as the disaster response networks. The existing routing solutions, or at least those solutions that are included in this survey, they're not yet able to cope with or handle the routing complications of the disaster response networks. The adoption of the cognitive radio in the design and development of disaster-dedicated routing solutions is highly required towards the efficient and reliable routing in post-disaster scenarios or in general emergency networks. Finally, I hope I made my presentation clear and to the point. Again, I'm so glad to be here for the first time and hopefully not for the last time. Regards and greetings for everyone around. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation, and it was very clear presentation. If we have any question, please go ahead. Any questions from the audience, panelists? I think it was very clear presentation and very interesting one. This is part of your PhD, right?
Yes, doctor. It's actually the literature review part of my PhD.
Yes. Okay. So hopefully you'll finish soon, or you still have some time?
Just
Come
wish me
back to
luck.
us.
It will be
Good luck.
completed within 1 year, hopefully.
Yes, yes. We'll be looking forward to see you here in Palestine.
Yes, thank you very much, doctor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If there are no questions, we can move on to the next and final.
Maybe I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is you did something like survey for routing the protocols.
Yes.
And in the future, do you plan to do like maybe implementing or developing those protocols, developing a new protocol, or comparing performance based on some simulation or some experimental work? Is this your plan?
Actually, my plan is totally different from the thing you're talking about. This article is all about the research gap of my research, actually. I'm working on development a new cognitive radio-based routing protocol for disaster response networks. So I'll have my own protocol, and hopefully in the future it will be compared or it will be included in another survey or any review paper, and hopefully you will see my protocol within 1 year maybe. I'm almost in the final stages of my protocol development.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
If I might ask a question, please.
Yes, please, go ahead.
I'm waiting.
Yes. Are you considering the quality of service in terms of routing protocols when you're talking about disasters? There maybe will be some necessity for quality of service in such a connection when you route in disaster cases. So I didn't see anything talking about this issue. And maybe you are going to consider this issue also in your future work and your PhD, because quality of services must be granted in such scenarios, actually, or not? Thank you.
Yes, as I have illustrated in the presentation, actually the routing, especially in constrained networks such as the disaster response network, there are almost 10 or 11 routing requirements. The first one is the quality of service, and the title or the final title for my research, the first word in my title is the quality of service. It's actually an important routing metric almost in all routing metrics, on all routing techniques or routing protocol. So it's a major component of any technique, and it's absolutely included in my title. Hope I answered your question, Dr. Wajdi.
Okay, that's right for me. Okay, because I didn't see that in your survey, and this is mostly crucial because nowadays we're talking about communication over internet, IoT, etc., and all of these topics, such telesurgery, maybe also education, must be some amount of bandwidth granted, some amount of quality of service granted. And when I see that protocols are not considering that issue till now, because we are using till now mostly back to switch networks. So we have still some leakage in this this topic actually. That's why I asked you. Maybe you are going to, but you are going to consider this issue in your future work. That's nice.
Yes, Doctor, absolutely. I'll include it. And as I told you, there are certain requirements for any routing protocol, among which quality of service is the most crucial one. And absolutely, it will be included in my title. The table that was in my presentation includes other routing protocols, and this makes clear the research gap. This is a justification of why I'm going to develop a new routing protocol, because anyone may say we have hundreds or tens of routing protocols. Why you're going to develop a new one? The table that was in the presentation clearly shows that still there is a gap for the satisfaction of the existing routing protocols for the routing requirements of the disaster response networks. And I took the disaster response network as a sample of many other types of constrained and restrained networks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Before we move to Dr. Wajdi's presentation. So, any other question? Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Khalid, and hopefully you'll be successful in your research, and we'll see your new protocol soon. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rashid. Thank you very much, Dr. Azidin Adwan. Thanks, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam. Now we move to the final presentation by Dr. Wajdi Halabi. I think his presentation is ready, right? So his presentation will be on traffic aggregation in IP-based WDM versus IP-based elastic optical networks. Dr. Wajdi, Dr. Engineer Wajdi Halabi, he has received his PhD from VRI University Brussels, VUB, Department of Electronics and Informatics, ETRO, in Brussels, Belgium, in December 2012. His master is in information technology from University of Applied Science in Bochum, Germany, in February 2005, and his high diploma in telecommunication engineering from University of Applied Science in Karlsruhe, Germany, right, in February 2002. Dr. Halabi has received the Erasmus Mundus External Cooperation Window, ECW Scholarship, and became in April 2009 a PhD researcher at the Electronics and Informatics Department, ETRO, of VRI University Brussels, VUB. His PhD entitled Design of New Routing Algorithm for Optical Multi-Domain Networks. His research activity focused on IPWDM and IBMMPLS-based ASOM GMPLS optical multi-domain networks, including multi-layer traffic engineering. Dr. Halabi was lecturer from October 2005 till 2012 and became an assistant professor in January 2013 at the University College of Science and Technology, Khan Yunis in Gaza Strip, Palestine. So welcome, Dr. Wajdi, and we are eager to hear your presentation. So the floor is yours.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome to my presentation, Traffic Aggregation IP-based Wave Division Multiplexing versus IP-based Elastic Optical Networks. My name is Wajdi Al-Halabi, Department of Computer Science and Information Technology, University College of Science and Technology. I'll start with the outline to my presentation. At the beginning, I'm going to discuss the Internet applications and the IP traffic combined with these applications, optical control plan, IBMPLS, IPWDM, traffic grooming, elastic optical networks, IBON as solution for this IP traffic growth problem, and then the simulations discussed or done to discuss these solutions and the conclusions at the end. However, most of the people know internet through these applications, but they do not know how they are communicating, how they are transferring data when they are communicating with each other, and how they are transmitting the data through the internet. All of these applications are actually IP-based applications. What does that mean? IP application because TCP/IP suite is the standard internet protocol used for communication through the internet, and all of these applications are using IP protocols, which means when we are using more IP application, we are producing more IP traffic, and this growth of IP traffic is enormously, especially when we are looking at the next generation of IoT and machine-to-machine communication. Therefore, Cisco has predicted that the IP traffic will increase more than 4 or 3-fold from 2017 till 2022. However, solution was suggested by using the optical WDM networks. Optical networks are connected through fibers, and each fiber can carry several lambdas, wavelengths, and each wavelength can establish a light path. A light path can connect source and destination, and can carry up to or from 2.5 gigabit per second up to 100 gigabit per second for that data transfer. The other problem is the IP routing itself, because there is no band guarantee, there is no quality of service guaranteed when we are using IP packet switching. And packet delay is also some problem of packet routing. IP, therefore, to solve this problem of IP routing, IETF, Internet Engineering Task Force, has proposed the MPLS, which is multi-protocol label switching traffic engineering, which suggested to decouple routing from forwarding data and using some routing protocol, which is called open shortest path with the traffic engineering extension. Also, the signaling protocol, resource reservation protocol with also traffic engineering extensions. The scheme of this MPLS is actually to find first the route, establish the connection, and then after establishing the connection, we are going to start transferring data, which means we need some amount of bandwidth capacity and to guarantee some kind of quality of service. Therefore, we find the sufficient resources to establish this connection, and afterwards, we are starting to send the data using this established or pre-negotiated route between source and destination, actually. And then after negotiation and establishing this connection, we are going to start transferring data and packets through this route pre-established. As an example for this, X wants to send some data to Y. IP packet is sent to LSR1. The closest one to Y is LSR6. LSR is label switched router. The LSR is looking in his routing table and find that the best route using open shortest path is this route from LSR1 to 4, 5 to 6, actually. And then after a pre-negotiation with LSR6, the resources are reserved and the connection is then established from LSR1 to LSR6. Afterwards, when the connection is established, resources are guaranteed, and the quality of service is there. So then packets are going to be sent by labeling each packet, and this label announced towards which router is the next hub. Actually, when it's 15, then LSR1 sends to LSR2. When it's 7, then this means that LSR2 sends to LSR4. However, and then till it is finds its way to LSR6. The IETF, Internet Engineering Task Force, has extended MPLS to GMPLS. What does that mean? MPLS became also some kind of routing protocol for optical networks. The L was actually replaced by lambda, by the wavelengths. Replaced by wavelengths, and MPLS became GMPLS. And light path became optical label switched path. So, furthermore, ITUT has proposed also the automated switching optical network as a control network for optical networks itself. which was robust and efficient use. So this has produced this model or this architecture for dynamic multi-layer routing from IBM BLS router towards combined with the optical layer down below there in the picture. So if some connection is needed from source to destination, then after looking at the resources and figuring out what kind of route is available there, then an OLSP request is going to be sent to its Azon JBLS layer, which is responsible for reconfiguring or configuring the optical layer. Then, when the sufficient resources are there, an OLSP setup is granted, and then the connection is granted from source destination through these through the optical layer from source destination. However, this is called dynamic multi-layer routing, combining IBM BLS and Azon JBLS layers in routing traffic and support traffic engineering to guarantee quality of service in the optical networks or in the internet actually in general. So this works actually like this. We have X and Y again, sender and receiver, and we have here in the MBLS layer LSR1, 2, 4, 5, 6. And we want to send exactly the same route from we are going to use the same route actually from LSR1 to LS6. However, but after pre-negotiation and finding the best route in the IBM BLS layer, the above layer there, then we have found that there is some sufficient resources on the optical layer. The data is being transferred after establishing the connection from LSR1 to LS6 through the optical layer, and therefore a light path or optical label associated path is going to be established from source to destination, which means at the beginning here, LSR1, the packets are going to be converted to optical signals for electro-optical conversion, getting through the established route, light path to optical to the destination, and then again the optical electrical conversion is done to send the data to the destination. However, the communication through this light path is highly efficient. Each light path can carry up to 2.5 or from 2.5 gigabit per second to 100 gigabit per second, which means maybe and single connection is too few for this whole capacity, which means there is unused capacity, residual capacity on each light path. Therefore, this traffic grooming was suggested, which means traffic aggregation, several connections are going to be aggregated together using the same light path. However, and this is called traffic grooming or traffic aggregation, which means we can send or establish several LSPs over the same light path. LSP 1, 2, 3 using the same light path. Traffic aggregation using the same light path, and we have used or utilized the capacity as sufficient as possible. The problem of that if we have, for instance, here a connection from 1 to 2 and the other connection from 2 to 3, while we want now a third connection from 1 to 4, then we have to groom the connection over the residual capacity already available on this light path and this light path. We are going to convert the signal every time from optical to electrical, and each node we are going to groom the new connection over the residual capacity available on previous connected connections. However, and this means that every time we are going to make the electro-optical conversion, which is actually not only power consuming but also expensive, because these interfaces are also expensive. Therefore, OTN layer, which power consuming, was not the best solution. There has been also in the meantime some advances in the spectrum of optical networks, as we can divide nowadays the spectrum into finer slots. Previously, where the slots divided into 50 gigahertz slots, the spectrum was divided into 50 gigahertz slots, but nowadays it's possible to split the slots into much finer slots, just like 25 gigahertz, 12.5 gigahertz, or 6.25 gigahertz, which has made it possible to utilize the spectrum much more efficient than previously. In addition to that, there has been some advances in terms of hardware development, as BVT was developed, which is bandwidth variable transponder, responsible or capable to set up the connection and adjust the connection based on that requested capacity for that connection. So the connection, the capacity is much more efficiently used, and the optical network is much more flexible in terms of set up the right connection on the right capacity. In addition to that, the FlexGrid reconfigurable optical add-drop multiplexer was invented. Though these advances has created or has made possible the creation of the elastic optical networks, or the advent of that. So, in addition to this, the sliceable bandwidth variable transponder was also invented, or was proposed actually, so which is capable for assigning its capacity into a single or various optical network connections, which means single connection can be divided between one or more multiple connections. So, which means in this case that traffic rooming is now done directly on the optical layer, not using the IBM BLS optical layer, electrical layer, which means less power consuming and more efficient grooming. So, based on the literature, I have proposed this node for multi-layer IBM BLS based EON node model, which consists of IBM BLS router connected via some interfaces, optical electroconversion points connecting to the SPVT and ROADM connection, which means we have now this plan as a proposed plan for the data plan. We have now IBM BLS plan, and we have down there the optical layer. However, when we are going to connect now a new connection, suggest we have two connections from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, where is there some capacity available from 1 to 2 and then the other one from 2 to 3, and we want to set up a third connection between 1 and 3. In this case, we do not need to group the connection via the electro-optical conversion, just like previously. We can set the connection directly on the optical layer. But this is the advance of elastic optical networks, and this is the advance of IB-based elastic optical network. So now the simulation I tested my simulation via a Europe network topology, which consists of 28 nodes. The parameters for the simulation study was the blocking probability. Blocking probability was measured in terms of established connection via groomed or new light path establishment connection. So the results show clearly that the behavior in both cases is the same when we have enough electro-optical conversion boards connecting the IBM BLS layer with the optical layer. What is not the case if we have less boards? Then in this case, IB over WDM performs much worse than the case if it has much more electro-optical conversion points. So we can see here that IB WDM performs much worse than IB WDM if it has 64 boards, while IB over EON behaves similarly in both cases. Either we have 32 interfaces or 64 electro-optical interfaces. So the conclusion to that Both IBWDM and IBON networks behave nearly identical in multi-layer connection setup and traffic routing if a sufficient amount of electro-optical conversion points are available. In IBMPLS-based DWDM networks, the programmability is much higher if the amount of available electro-optical conversion points are less. The third contribution and the main contribution actually, this highlights, or the results highlights the superiority of IBMPLS-based EON, multi-layer routing and connection setup over IBMPLS-based DWDM. This is not, that shows not only that the costs are reduced, but also because it performs much better than IB over WDM with rigid optical networks. So that was the conclusion to my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Wajdi, for presenting this exciting research. Are any other questions for this for Dr. Wajdi's presentation? Dr. Khalid, you might have a question. If there is, you usually have questions there. So.
I wish I can ask Dr. Wajdi, but no questions to be asked, really. The presentation was clear and to the point. I just came to find out that we both are working on the same issue, which is routing.
Interesting.
Yes, but the only difference is the transmission medium. He's working on optical networks and I'm working on radio networks. So hopefully in the future there will be some sort of collaboration between us. Just wait for me, I'm coming. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. I hope I'm going to do something in the routing protocols future about real-time application for IoT. I'm planning to do some proposal on this issue for my postdoctorate, but I didn't find a really sufficient means to do that now. It is really crucial for telesurgery and teleprocessing, teleeducation, this issue.
Just wait for me, I'm coming.
Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Wajdi, you mentioned this performance is better, but I didn't see any kind of measurements or how much is better performance-wise.
That was in the last slide, actually, the results, where I show you that the curve above shows that if we have less conversion points, electro-optical conversion points between in the IBWDM, the normal classical multi-layer optical networks, was performing much worse than the IBON. The result shows that actually in the slide number 22, there has been programmability for about maybe 0.01%, while it was much better in the programmability when we had much more conversion points. While in the programmability or the programmability ratio in IBEON was much less, and not only that, it was quite the same if we have 64 ports or 32 conversion interfaces between IBMPLS and optical layer. That was actually shown in 22, slide 22. I hope that was the answer to the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Yes.
No, it looks we don't have any other questions, so we can stop this session. And I give the floor to Dr. Azzuddin to explain what goes on till the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rashid, for sharing this session.